so you know, some of these names I recognize, and many others I look forward to hopefully having an interaction with. This is geared. We're kind of gearing this more for not beginners and good God, no talking about f-stops or anything mundane like that. As many of you who know me know, I don't have the patience for that anyway. But it's going to be geared more towards you've been stuck, you can't go forward with your project. Maybe you have a little bit of what I call the acute single syndrome, which is an illness that many of the photographers around here have. We're going to talk a little bit about some academic notions, but it's ultimately about some surprising paths that you can take to liberate yourselves, because I think a lot of us are almost colonized by our assumptions of what photography is or has to be, and there's never been a more liberated time to be doing photography in that sense. So just so you know, for those of you on here that I recognize that have done some of the other workshops, it's going to be a little more chill. We are trying to keep it, and whenever Alice, the beautiful Alice, starts, we're going to try to keep it, maybe depending on how many questions we get, we'll answer during, just keep it super chill and easy. But if there's a lot of questions, then we'll probably keep it at the end, and we're going to keep at least half an hour for Q&A. And then the second workshop, the actual one in December, that's where we get to see your work.
Exciting. Okay, guys, so I'm going to disable the chat function, but we have a Q&A section. So any questions you have, please fire them into that Q&A. Whenever you have a question, pop it in, and then we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end. So without further ado, let me just make sure I can share my screen with you all. This might take a minute or so. We should take a sec. Alrighty. It's working. So I see a lot of familiar faces or names as part of the kind of extended GPP family today, but basically, I'll give you a short introduction for those of you who don't know GPP. So my name's Alice. I work with Gulf Photo Plus, and Gulf Photo Plus, or GPP as we are often known as, is a photography center based in Dubai in the UAE. On the business end of life, we run practical photography workshops for individuals and corporates. We have a high quality print lab. We have a small bookstore where we also sell films, if there's any analog lovers among us. So with being, a hub for photography and its development in the region, the business end really helps us support with our kind of wider focus as a platform for photographers from the Middle East and North Africa to showcase their work, and also to provide them with resources from which to learn from. We've been very privileged to help expand the literacy around image making in this region, and in providing support for photographers who want to tell interesting stories as well. Tanya, for example, is here she is one of the people who we've previously brought over to the UAE a few times. She's taught workshops with us during our annual event, GPP Photo Week. And whilst we're based in the Middle East, we've been able to kind of expand the dialogue abroad as well. We're very privileged in that sense. I think in the exhibition images coming up, you can see some of Tanya's work here, which was exhibited this year at the most recent Breda Photo Fest in the Netherlands. And this was curated by Mohammed Somji, our director. So for today, Tanya's kicking off the first webinar. This is our fundamentals series, and the program, it's a series of online seminars and workshops, which we hope will provide mentorship to the kind of rising generation, as Tanya said, beginners who are starting out in their kind of creative journey within the MENA region. Honestly, this project's been on our bucket list for a long time. And we feel it's especially relevant now, given with the current situation with regards to Corona. it's been, I know for myself, definitely a time of reflection, you know, a chance to press that reset button, and a great opportunity to learn new skills and build upon what we have, which we hope this program will aid you with. So coming up, if you haven't seen already, I would assume you've mostly registered already, but if you haven't, so November 10th, we have zines and photo book making with Roy Sade. We have writing your artist statement with Maisal Bake. And we also have diversifying your photography income. So how to sell your work beyond the traditional kind of freelancer means. So yeah, if you haven't already, please check those out. They are free, sign up online. And particularly we want to extend our thanks to the Goethe Institut, you know, for their belief in this series, and our artists and our photographers. You know, this project wouldn't have been possible without their support and their funding. Next up, so a lot of people ask us this. So how do we get in touch with GPP? How do we submit our work? And you can do so. So if it's on our exhibitions page, but we look at everything there in a kind of a wider context. So if you'd like to share your work, hit up gophotoplus.com/exhibitions. And, you know, we're looking at this work to be considered, you know, maybe you want to hold a talk, you know, or you want to be considered for an exhibition or for a call out. And, you know, we also welcome you to share your work with us on social media. So just tag us at gophotoplus. This is on our exhibition page. Just scroll right down to the bottom right, submit your work, and we will see it. And then lastly, before I intro Tanya, so this, I think it went live today. This is really exciting news. So this is, Magnum Foundation has just announced this call out. And this is part of the 2021 Photography and Social Justice Fellowship. So I'm going to read their spiel. They are looking for applicants who are passionate about challenging injustice, pursuing social equality, and advancing human rights through the medium of photography. And, you know, this time around, because of the corona situation, happily the program will be held online. It will be remote, and they will be taking into consideration like the time zones of different participants. So I really think this is a fantastic opportunity for, you know, folks from the MENA region to apply. So check out the program. It's magnumfoundation.org/opportunities, or if you go to magnumfoundation.org, it's the first thing you'll see on their webpage. So that brings us to Tanya. I will do my introduction to Tanya. So I have the pleasure of introducing Tanya Habjouqa, who is going to blow your mind for the next 90 minutes, I'm sure. Tanya's born in Jordan and raised between Texas and the Middle East. You're in Palestine right now, right? I know someone was asking.
Yes.
With that 2-hour time difference. She's earned a reputation for her documentary work, but brings politics and creative vision into the same frame. Her focus on identity and political issues and gender in the Middle East has always included a layer of gravitas and an intuitive sense of metaphor beneath her work. She's an artist, educator, and member of NOOR Images, and she's been a long-term series. She has a long-term series-based approach with regards to her journalistic, conceptual, research, and documentary practices. Her projects have been commended by the likes of World Press Photo, Time, the Smithsonian, Photo Plus, and she's hired by organizations such as Amnesty International to make multi-country media campaigns. She's also a mentor in the acclaimed Arab documentary photography program, co-editor of Jadaliyya's academic journals, co-founder of Ruwa. This is a multidisciplinary creative platform for visual storytellers across the Middle East. Honestly, a bit of a formal bio, it doesn't really do justice to the person that Tanya is. Mo and I were discussing this earlier, and we feel very lucky to have her sharing her wealth of knowledge and experience with us. Dedication to sharing her insights and to educating others is unmatched. So Tanya, thank you so much for being here tonight. And on top of that, she's also a mother of 2. So just one thing before we start, so just to remind everyone, so please leave any questions in the Q&A section. If you're on a mobile, just tap the bottom of your screen and we'll compile all those questions together. And just a quick one on Tanya's workshop. Tomorrow we'll be sending everyone who's attended an email on how to apply. It's a small workshop for just 4 people, so we're going to keep it small, but we will also be able to share that with you. We're going to live stream the workshop and the feedback that Tanya gives to the participants. So I will hand over to Tanya. That's my spiel done. Thank you so much for bearing with me.
Thank you.
All right, there you go.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen here. 1 second. La 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 la. Let's make that full screen. Is everybody seeing a happy child in the middle of the bed? Yes, I hope. Alice, are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right. So normally at this point in the workshop, I would ask you questions and I would feed off of you. And then that would give me the energy to kind of gear the talk in the direction that you're hungry for. But in this new reality that we're in, I'm gonna have to do it a little bit differently. But again, I do have the Q&A open. So actually, no, when I'm in this mode, I can't really see it, but we will have time at the end. And if there's just a few questions, Alice, please just pop in and ask me. I don't mind stopping in the middle,
Cool.
kind of having more of just a connection that way. So we're all stuck going on 8 months longer. We don't know how long this is going to be. Some of us are having midlife crises, existential crises. We're stuck. We're questioning what can we do with our photography. This is in a way, it's been a forced time of reevaluation and possibility. I don't think I've ever written more proposals or thought more deeply about my work simply from the lack of mobility, right, and distraction. So there's a lot of opportunity here in this time. The first thing I'm going to start with is the personal. I think it's amazing how many photographers that I meet, particularly in our region, we're really just looking for affirmation. But this is actually worldwide. I see photographers asking, oh, I'm trying to be a photographer. I hope to be a photographer. It's not like being a photographer is some sort of elite thing that you suddenly you get a star, you're a photographer, right? You're a photographer, in my perspective, when you have something to say, right? And there's people who have a lot of things to say, and just because you have been published in XYZ, getting published in these places is increasingly difficult. This is, in some ways, it's never been a more difficult time in the industry. But on the other hand, you've never had more platforms to get your own work out, or if your work is misrepresented, to then utilize one of these platforms to write it, to put it exactly as you would. But so just that's the first thing. It's like we have so much self-doubt, agonizing over, am I a photographer? You're a photographer, man, if you have something to say. But that's the point. And we have this amazing program, and a couple of our brilliant former mentees are on here kicking butt, doing insane work. And the 6-month Arab documentary photo program is a game changer. If I'd had that in my 20s, I probably wouldn't have shyly put my head down and been insecure in all of my 20s. Am I a photographer? Am I a photographer? Yes, you are, but do you have something to say? And right now, there's a revolution happening. We're liberating ourselves from a kind of colonization of photography where we're emulating what we think is right? We're emulating parachute journalism that began 30 years ago that the leaders in the industry aren't even following anymore, right? And in our region, we're telling our own stories, and it's time to find unique ways to do it because there's no cookie cutter approach to telling stories. I envy pictures that I see in Latin America, that I see this freshness, this ease of body and sort of just this movement and body and people just raw in that moment. And it's distinctly different than things that in many of the places we photograph in our region, we don't have that kind of access. So you have to make it work wherever you are. And actually, through the ADPP program and the work that I'm seeing, I actually think that the restrictions that we have, and there are many, be it geopolitical, social, cultural, whatever it is, can't get access because of a checkpoint, on and on and on. I think that for the photographers that are sort of realizing that they can make their own path to storytelling, navigating this, as I always call it, the multi-disciplinary approach, it's actually making us better. It's making us more innovative and more interesting. There's projects that I show from our region when I'm teaching in Europe that people's minds are blown. Like, how did you get there, right? So we can utilize what is holding us back to an advantage. But the first thing I'm going to start with is adorable little girl you see in the middle. That's me. That's when I was 4 years old, and I'm beside my grandfather, who died shortly after, who was 100 years old. And then the lovely woman beside me, that's my grandmother, the first woman in Jordan to have her driver's license, drove in the 67 war to get my aunt from school in Jerusalem, a badass. And this woman is the person whose memory motivates everything that I do. The reason I'm showing you this isn't just to brag about my grandmother. It's, you really need to question your motivation, because countless people come to me in their workshops, and first of all, don't show me your singles. Singles don't say anything. If you give a chimpanzee an iPhone, they're going to stumble upon a pretty picture. Those that know me well know that I'm holding back. Since this is online, I'm not going to do my usual cursing. I don't care about your singles, right? I want to see you build a narrative, concept. I want you to tell me something. I look at a photo project as a novel. When you're reading a really good book and you lose yourself in it and you get that flow, that suspension of disbelief, that is what a photo project can be. Or it can be a slower one, a little more complex, that you open and put down and think about later. But it's not a singles thing, right? So you are a photographer, yes, but if you want to just take pretty pictures of your food or skies or whatever, keep your Instagram account, fine. But please, for the love of God, don't go to photo meetings and show me your portfolio. I want to see your concept. The first thing I want to know is, why are you telling the story? What's your personal motivation? And it doesn't have to be you grew up in the place, etc. But for me, this is my personal motivation. What guides me is the fact that I was insider, outsider. I was Texan, but I was Jordanian, and I left at a young age, so feeling a bit lost. And I found a lot of the most interesting photographers are a bit like that. They're sort of in between worlds. They're literally half something else, or raised somewhere else. So they just felt like outsiders in their place. And in this photo world, that's our role, is we're trying to make sense of things. And I think that we are, for those of us that are sort of in a perpetual liminal state of existence, this world is a very comfortable world to exist in. So with that, I'm going to briefly go over occupied pleasures. I'm going to leave it here because of the words. For those that know me well, know that photography, it's a deeply intellectual exercise, actually. And where it's going is it's reaching new heights. But you need to find your personal bliss. For me, titles. If I get the right title, I have almost the entire framework of the project. There's times that I get the title first. There's times I struggle to find it, but the title is very important. So I'm going to show just a few pictures from this work because I've lived it. I've shown it too much. I want to go on to the newer work. But this project was a game changer for me, again, for that confidence issue, because I didn't dare deviate. I worked as a freelance journalist in news. I did some hard news. I worked for Wires. I didn't dare put any of me, the personal, in, even though there's times that personal and the personal interaction is deeper to what is happening on the ground than an outsider coming in and assuming they're telling the truth, right? But these sort of questions weren't really accepted in the documentary realm when I was coming up. So occupied pleasures is the first time that I say I dared. I dared to put a bit of myself and what I was seeing, what I was feeling, and more importantly, that I started to collaborate with the people and have them have a say in their reputation directly. This is where I tiptoed in. So the title. Now, when you're building a project, so title, concept, these are the things I start with, especially if you're really at the beginning and you're struggling. I play with titles, working titles, okay? As almost a placeholder if you don't have that aha moment yet. Another thing is you want your thesis image. You want to be able to prove your thesis. So this image from the series was the first one. It's not my favorite, but it was the first one in the series that I was like, this is the standard. This image is doing everything that I want. It's proving my thesis. This is a woman walking through the tunnels in Gaza on her way to a wedding party in Egypt. And it took I had a lot of difficulty getting access to this. This was actually the last time I was allowed into Gaza. The Israelis have blocked me. But in this tunnel, not knowing I was going to get a picture, this woman appeared. And I was so surprised to see her. It was almost a mirage that I almost missed the picture. And I said, where are you going? And she said, wedding in Egypt. Super nonchalant. And it was that nonchalance that was jarring. And it was the ease of which she was walking as if she were in a airport in New York City or a bus station in Paris, right? The normalcy for her, that's what was jarring. And so again, prove your thesis. And ideally you should have 3 to 5 of these images. But when you get that one image, that's a turnaround moment, really. Then you want to seek out the metaphoric moments, the emotional moments. You want all of that to be, when you're looking at a book, when you're reading one, when you're seeing a movie, you want all of it. You want to be emotionally taken, politically taken, intellectually taken, right? And so emotionally, how do I feel about this place? This is one of those metaphoric pictures. It could be, he could be dead. He could be in bliss. You don't know. Also a little bit of mystery. You don't want to lay everything out. And in this case, this is one of the many occupied national parks. The Israelis like to take over beautiful areas in the West Bank and call it a national park. It's a settlement. And so quite often there'll be teenagers or Israeli settlers that are given full access. And in this case, the lifeguard would always scream when the Palestinians would jump in the water, whether it was the fathers or the sons. And it's this beautiful spot with ice cold water and fish that nobody knows how the fish got there because it's not connected to a stream. And so this little boy who drove all the way, he came all the way from Hebron, quite a drive on a Sunday. He waited until the end of the day. And as the lifeguard was walking down, I watched him. So you just sit back and watch. It's not about, sometimes I will wait 5, 7 hours for one picture. Sometimes I will go back to the same place 5, 7, 8, 10 times for hours. I'm obsessive. I'm not interested in a million pictures. I'm interested in one picture that has an entire story in and of itself, a perfect short story that I'm then going to connect to a collection of short stories and say something greater. So in this case, I felt him. And you have to start to trust that instinct and develop that instinct, right? He was worth the wait. And indeed, when I saw him move surreptitiously and then run and jump into the water, no one was around to scream at him. And he jumped and he just floated there. So it's actually freedom. But that's what I like about the image, is that it's something in between. And most of us are broke, huh? I hope you're not getting into this industry for any other reason, right? Like keep your day jobs or try to have those sort of day jobs that are a little bit fluid. That's why one of the first things I tell my students is don't do this unless you're obsessed. It has to be a compulsion that's driving you, because it is one of the hardest, there's Kurt Vonnegut talks about children being, that there's kids that standing on a coffee table saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. Those are writers. I think those are all creatives. And you're not going to get that affirmation. You're going to get so many rejections, but it's got to be something inside of you that you feel you need to tell, right? And so, but to circumvent the fact that you don't always have money, I utilize assignments. So every single time I'm in the field, whether it's for an NGO, and it's sometimes it's an NGO that wants something super basic that you wouldn't even ever put in your portfolio, you give that to them, but then you also give them something else. You try to elevate their standard, right? But then most importantly, you're there, you've done a good job, your name is all you have in this industry. You give them what they want, you try to give them a little extra, elevate the game, you get something for you, something. It's a waste of every opportunity when you go to the field and you don't come out with something that you would put in your book or your portfolio, right? It's always for you. And so in this case, I was actually doing a favor for somebody who worked at an NGO, was trying to fundraise for Palestinians that were doing yoga in the villages. And I found a perfect situation, befriended, and went back later on a day they were doing a nature walk, what they called inner resistance. This image is quite known. I'm not going to go into the story because I want to show some other pictures, but also simultaneously, just a hint for those that don't know the story, when you find someone that is interesting and you feel it, when you find a character that represents the greater issues that you're playing at, and this guy was just an insane young mechanic who dreamt of being an actor. And I knew that a moment would come with him. There was no moment when I met him that yielded itself to a photograph. Stay in contact, keep that dialogue. I think it's far more interesting at times. Yes, street photography is gold and I still do it, and I still am lucky when I find those perfect moments, but some of the more interesting layered images are the ones that, hello Heath, are the ones that you work for, that you don't bring your camera out. I hide my camera. When I have the luxury of time, I'm most interested in having tea, talking, and then letting that moment reveal itself later. So just to say, let's see, Alice, the way I have this open is I have something blocking the full screen. So if you could, for me, read the first quote in black.
For sure. So I have in black, people are moving towards their country to represent themselves by themselves, owning their own stories and voices to challenge stereotypes, single angle stories and Orientalism. And the industry is moving towards decolonizing photography, local photographers and collaborative/engaging community stories.
So the second quote, I'll let you guys read it yourselves if you want to. But this is also an exciting time because there used to be, it was almost like, oh, he's a local, they are a local photographer, right? And there was this assumption that it needed to be someone from the outside because they would be less biased, right? Which is insane. Less biased to tell their own story, their own life. Who can do that nuance? And more importantly, we've seen how damaging media can be. I actually argue to some degree, photography has failed in Palestine. There's no shortage of documentation of really key events and wars and let's say human rights abuses. It's not that there's not amazing, strong images that show that, but so what? It's not worked. It hasn't changed status quo. So then we have to question, how can we, the dialogue isn't working. What else can we do? Never come in and just be derivative. Derivative is the sin of photography, okay? If you come in and you just stand at room view and you just do this, you don't try this, you should always try to come in and make your own mark in any way that you can. And no one is, there's very few geniuses that are reinventing the wheel. I hardly think, I dream that I will one day, but what I can tell you is I will always try to agonize it and have an encounter and put my own perspective or interactive. I will try to have a genuine interaction to try to color it and leave a mark, a tangible mark in some way that leaves something genuine to that and original to that interaction. So furthermore, I can take pretty pictures. I can take pretty pictures, right? But I'm bored by it. I'm bored of, and again, a perfectly sequenced 12-image photo essay is golden, and it's an art form, and it's not easy, but at the same time, there's a bit of a formula to it. And I'm bored by that formula. I'm bored by pretty pictures. When I'm in a situation, I've had a million assignments. I've taken a million pictures. I want photography to mean something else to me. And so Ariela Azoulay is someone I highly recommend. If you haven't read her, or if you're struggling to read her, she's not necessarily easy, but she's well worth it. She's a revolutionary. And she's questioning what photography can do. What can we do with photography? Can we take it somewhere else? Can we challenge denial of identity in nation states? What can we do with it? Does photography, it can open up the space for agency despite the hierarchical relationship between state and citizen. So I'm going to show you. So these are two questions that I asked myself. I'm not going to read them because, again, I can't, but you can all read them. So can image serve as a space for action and agency? I'm going to show you a project that this was early on. I think she did this in the early 2000s, late 90s. Where we come from, Emily Jasser. She's a prominent Palestinian-American artist who is in museums around the world. But this is actually one of her most innocent, simple early projects. And it was basically, again, always question your privilege. That's the other thing. I agonize over my privilege. I never, ever take that for granted. And when you genuinely encounter your privilege and question it and interact with that, keeping you in check, it will elevate your work immediately. And you can then start to use your privilege to take and challenge these norms. And in this case, she used her privilege at the time as an American passport holder when she went into Israel. She would simply ask people, what can I do for you? People who couldn't get access to the country or were stuck in Gaza and couldn't go to Jerusalem, et cetera, et cetera. And so her exhibit was super simple. Two photographs, and one would be the letter of what they asked. So for example, go to Jerusalem and light a candle on the grave of Christ to the Holy Sepulchre, and go to Al-Aqsa Mosque and pray to God to ease the pressure and help those who are needy in both places. I've been denied entry into Palestine since 91, the ID, the name, et cetera, et cetera. So so the pictures are not a game-changing, they're not game-changing photography in terms of the visuals itself, but what I'm more interested in is her thought process about using the photographs to move something, to move an idea, to challenge. And so with that, I'm going to show a project I've been working on for the last 5 years that's been, to be honest, the hardest project that I have ever done. And it's finally, it had a home, it had its first exhibit in Breda, and they did an amazing design. And Mohammed Samji, the guru of founder of Gulf Photo Plus, and his colleague Hala, but Samji was a co-curator of that exhibit. Of course, I couldn't see it because I couldn't go to Europe, but it had its first exhibit, and I'm now working with an amazing book designer. It's going to finally have a home. But I have agonized over this project because it's the first time that I've included Israelis, Palestinians together, whereas in the last project, Occupied Pleasures, the Palestinians were there, and the occupation was sort of a collective caricature of what is occupation under Israel. That you didn't see any Israelis. They were hinted, the occupation was hinted. This is direct. But I also went a little further into the madness. I also felt, to quote Edward Said in his amazing essay, Permission to Narrate, as I pushed more and more, I felt better at what I was doing. It felt like, not only this is me, but more importantly, it was like, this is saying, you know that feeling when you publish something and it's published, and once in a blue moon, a photo editor just nails it, and you're like, yes. But then you also know that feeling where you look at it and it doesn't say what you wanted it to say. The more I started to push and challenge, the better I felt that I was representing the place. And increasingly, I also started to utilize multi-platforms and challenge things in that way. And I'm going to tell you a pro and con about how far you can go with that a little bit later. But the Unholy Land / Sacred Space Oddity, I'm not going to read this to you, but this is the kind of writing, if you guys want to maybe take a screenshot, this is the kind of writing that I utilize when I'm applying to grants. And I've gotten quite a few grants. It's actually, I've had a dry run the last couple of years, but before that I had a really good run. But the point is, again, photography it's an intellectual exercise, and you need to be able to prove your thesis and say something new. Why you want it to, because I also now have been reading and judging proposals and contests. And now that I'm on the other end of it, I can tell you what I want when somebody's applying. I want you to write something that you prove your thesis. I know you've got your sheet together, but also I want you to make me want to see it. I want to read it and be like, oh man, that's a project I want to see. Okay, so with that, before I push the button and show you something a little different, I'm also going to say that increasingly for me, photography is no longer photography. It's kind of like some people are colorblind and they don't see different colors. I actually increasingly don't see the difference between text and image and sound and GIF and still. I am a crow. I'm a wacky crow flying overhead and just looking for any stimulation that I feel adds or enhances the story. If it's the sound of somebody walking on gravel, I'm going to go in, I'm going to grab that audio. I don't know where the hell I'm going to use it. I just have if I show you my desktop right now, you would gasp. I just have multiple folders filled with maybe later virtual sound, this, that, the other, a piece of paper scribbled with the word that gave me a feeling about the place that I was in. You just gather it all like you're building a nest, and you never know where you're going to build it and put it later. Because again, we work on these projects for years, we're broke. So you take those assignments, be it NGO, be it news, and you give them what they want, but you try to get something for yourself for your project. You pitch those projects to get access to those places as well when you're not getting the grants. And you never know. So you want to have a hat, you're like, this is the fine art hat. You have to think positively. Like when I have my photo exhibit, I'm going to want it to be virtual, and I'm going to want there to be audio overhead. So you just have all of those elements. This is when I have my exhibit. This is when I get into the New York Times. This is when, and you have multiple edits for this work. So in this case, what I'm about to show you, I was on assignment for a think tank documenting human rights abuses in the Jordan Valley, in the Ruwa. And only because I was on the assignment did I access this murdered farmer, Palestinian farmer. It made no major news, just brief local mention. I would never have, it was quite far away. I would never have gone. It wasn't a story I would have gone. I don't do hard news unless I'm given an assignment to do so. But I happened, because I was chasing this concept for this think tank for an assignment, I happened upon, while the blood was literally just fresh on the ground, a scene where there was a murdered farmer, Palestinian farmer, had been murdered by a settler. And so I found a rock. I'm going to push it now. I found a rock that had blood, still wet at the time, and you'll see in a second what looks like a heart. And it really was jarring to me. Yeah, there's the heart. It was jarring to me, and I picked it up. And again, you don't take, right? I just stared at it. I didn't know what to think of it. And I tried to give it to one of the family members that was showing me the spot. And I said, do you want this? It's shaped like a heart. And they said, no. And I took it because I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. And it was in my bedroom actually for 3 years. And I showed it to a designer I was working with, and because she was going to come to Jerusalem. I said, "Oh, you want to do photogrammetry? It's where you turn it into a 3D." I said, and I didn't know how to do it. And I said, "Well, could I assign you? Could I hire you to do that for me? You could carry it back with you to New York." And her eyes went even wider. She said, "I don't want to carry that, and that's been in your bedroom." And then I understood the heaviness of this object, and I needed to let it out. And so, actually, in the exhibit, you use your fingers to interact and move the rock. You can continuously move it as a with photogrammetry, moving it as a 3D object. And it also forces an interaction with the object and his death. The rock has since been buried in the sea. And so these images, I'm just going to show you some stills from the project. And again, when I show an image, it should be layered. You should be able to have your own metaphoric read on it. There should be the clues and the hints. I tried to bring humor when applicable, because Black humor actually can be extremely poignant and political as well. But I want you to, I also try to be a bit playful, because we have no shortage of images here. So I want to bring you to look and question and say, and think about this place differently, reconsider it. Because again, no lack of amazing photojournalism, and yet status quo, here we are. And again, some of the best, now that I switched my mindset of, oh, this is an assignment for aid, this is an assignment for, you should always be photographing for yourself. So this was an assignment for an NGO, but I went and I met an amazing family. It's also in the Jordan Valley, and it's a farming family who there's a settler nearby, French settler, the whisperer is named Didi, because Didi traumatizes the families around. And this little girl, she's pretending to be Snow White. She's actually laying in the dirt, the dirt that her father, the tractor had plowed an edge into the ground. But she's reenacting fairy tales, but she also whispers Didi's name. And Didi, the settler, had in front of her put his hand out to shake her father's hand. And the father really didn't have any choice. And when he took the hand, he pulled him in and headbutted him so hard that his head split open, her father's head split open, and blood fell everywhere on the ground. And so these kids are traumatized, and how do you photograph that, right? So I've got the connection with the kids. We're playing. I don't want them to, the kids whispered his name. The story came from the parents, but you have to think out of the box about how to get to that. And if you're only showing gore, there's definitely, sadly, a compassion fatigue, right? And then you also want to find, so this is actually a still, but I also have a moving video with audio. Again, that black bird, everything is a possibility for this project, for any project that you're working on, and the multiple hats and outfits, right, that it can take. And so this is one of the baptism sites. Within just 40 kilometers from each other, there's 3 baptism sites. One is along the occupied West Bank, and you have literally there's hardly any water left in that Jordan, holy River Jordan anymore, right? There's hardly any water left. But you've got balls, little sort of floating balls separating. You could touch each other, right? The contested West Bank occupied border in Jordan, like people could hug each other across this border, but there's soldiers on each side watching. And the funny part is there's a debate about, so maybe you put your money, you said, oh, I believe that this side of the few inches apart, this side is the holy part. This is where it happened. This is where the baptism of Jesus happened. However, you're there and you take a selfie. What you're going to see when you're in the water and you're taking the selfie is the Israeli flag. right? So that you went to Jordan, but you take, and there's a giant flag. And so then it's another meta war, right? It becomes, because the war is also about tourism and money. And so you went to Jordan, you spent your money, but you put your photograph online, went to the baptism site, and there's the Israeli flag. And it's of course the same on the other end. And in this picture, you actually have, this is the invented site. After the 67 war, there were too many landmines to start the industry of tourism at this site. So they invented an entirely new location in the north of the Galilee that had no historical reference. But today, this is the most popular site of any of them, where just people flock, right, to go and have their moment of holy reflection. And what's really funny about it is my Palestinian husband, he's a 48er, he's from that area. He says that teenagers used to go and smoke various cigarettes, whatever, since this is live, and they would smoke and laugh at the tourists because he's a Palestinian Christian. It's like, this is ridiculous, and it was just a bit of mockery. So you want to find these contested sites, and you want to think about what are the layers. So because we don't have much time, I'm not showing you all of the interactive layers, but I also created a giant audio file of radio stations interrupting each other. And then you have this moving. So you want to think about all of these elements that you can bring and create that tension. Another NGO assignment. This was in Aida refugee camp, and it was based on a study that this population of the camp is the world's most, it was from Stanford University or Berkeley, I can't remember now, but the world's most tear gas population. And so here we are back to layered photography, but also collaboration. And in our region, right, quite often people give up because it's no, you can't photograph me, no. There's ways around that. For me, the most important thing is the story. I interview first, or I just sit and talk. And if their story compels me, and I'm going to show you work where I worked for 5 years, getting very few pictures in those 5 years, but their stories moved me, and I knew that I would find a way to visualize it. In this case, it's a mother behind the little girl, and she's pregnant. You can't see her belly or face. Her daughter is on her lap. She'd had two not abortions, what do you call it? When you lose the child. She'd lost 2 babies that were in her womb because of the tear gas, right? And she was pregnant a 3rd time trying. And so she told me her story. We connected. She sobbed. She wanted to tell her story, but she was afraid for various reasons to show her face. So looking, I just said, can we find another way if your face isn't showing? She said yes. And together we figured out ways that she felt safe. And it was actually a beautiful, and quite often, once you get to that level, which is only going to happen if you listen, if it's not about the photograph, if you're not sitting there twitching and like, I'm willing to go back. If their story's compelling, I'll go back 2, 3, 4 times, right? But you can always find a way. Oh, not a question. Paper mustache. Thanks, paper mustache. Okay, and again, these little details. Trust your instincts, right? So this was in a house that had been demolished, and they rebuilt it very basically. It's a family of about 12 in Wallija, and they had more demolition orders. And they knew that, Sarah Lando, you're a genius. Sarah Lando, guys, trust me, follow her. Her work will make you sob. So it's those little details, trust. So you're sitting and you're listening. Again, one of the best things is first you're getting a rapport, but you're taking time in those moments to sit and contemplate their words and look around and think, especially if you're dealing with a situation where they don't want you to, they're afraid to be photographed. And so for me, I couldn't get my mind off of this little sort of Sistine Chapel, the idea that the house had already been demolished and the father loved his space, his humble abode, but he loved it so much that he again built these little structures. So it was that tenderness that drove me. And the mother didn't want to be photographed, but the children are usually, in this case, fine. But you don't want pictures of kids. You don't want any of that. You want to bring metaphors. You want to let those little details have a feeling. Again, try to layer emotion, metaphor, politics. It should all be layered and in there. And again, playing. So in this case, so this is between theater and a portrait and a real moment. It's something in between. Like this, I would not submit to the New York Times, for example, right? It's not a news style image, although it's actually quite true. This is a community whose house has been demolished 130, whose community has been demolished 130 times in something like 10 years, which is insane. It's a Bedouin community in the Nekam. And what brought me there was because it had been well documented in news. I actually was interested because, again, thinking about playing with all of the past, present, the holy books, this would have been the path that Hajar and her son Ishmael would have ventured when they went out, before they, as the story says, ended up getting Zamzam water in Saudi. And there was a little boy and men from the village that were rebuilding rebuilding a well, right, that had been demolished. And so this idea of a well and a desert and being cast out, I was thinking about those layers. And I actually talked with the women. I asked about their interpretation of the story of Hajar and Sarah. And so again, when you talk and you involve people in their images, many things can happen. In some cases of trauma, it's actually, I swear to God, there's points that it can be healing for both of you. But especially for the people who in particular children, right? It's like a welcome respite. But so together we created this sort of homage to Hajar and her son. So, and another layer, I'm going to go through this more quickly. This is one of the chapters. We're all children of 9 months. Again, what's in a name? For me, when I heard that proverb, we're all children of 9 months, I couldn't think of a more telling proverb, because you use it in a method of tension here, because this is a place where that saying of equality doesn't hold true. And so how do you tell the story of smuggled sperm, there's the phenomenon, for those of you that don't know, of smuggled sperm from jails, Palestinians that are incarcerated in Israeli jails, who are not given the same rights as Israeli citizens, no conjugal visits, etc., etc. And so there is a phenomenon of 76 plus babies now born from smuggled sperm in candy wrappers, in chips, in empty lighters. And it's insane. And I could take portraits of the babies, I could take portraits of this, but how do you tell that story? And again, I'm interested in how can you push the language of photography somewhere else? I like to mix in investigative reporting, theater, psychology, art, all of it. Any method is fair game, as long as I'm keeping the integrity of the story, right? The integrity of the story and the truth of that community, right? And so I applied journalistic principles in terms of, invention. I am very, and I'm talking about my personal work now. I am very transparent and all of that. And that's key for those of you that have yet, who are still like, oh, and you're following the sort of convention of what you assume is the sort of classic mode of documentary work, which is really being challenged. And there's not been a more exciting time for that. But so these are actually, it's copies from the state. This is the fatwa, giving permission for mothers, for women married to prisoners to get pregnant in this manner. And I've just pulled out the main criteria. The couple already had to have intercourse. The husband has to be sentenced to 20 plus years. And the wife's age by the time of expected release is past fertility phase, right? And can you read this quote to me, Alice, or to everyone rather, Alice?
I think so. I have to strain my eyes a little. I told my husband that even though we did this, you took away the dearest thing to my heart, which is to be an ordinary mother. Now I have to be more a mother and a father in one, and I tend to play the father's role more to compensate and keep you present in their lives.
So again, when I told you earlier, I really increasingly don't see the difference between text and sound and audio. Sometimes that one word or a sentence or a quote can convey so much, and you can treat the text as a visual form, right? And then it will elevate the whole thing. And I can see Stacy, but again, for some reason, because it's full screen when I share, more of a visual story photographer. I'm a documentary. I think that's another thing. We get hung up on, I'm this, I'm that. I'm a documentary photographer. If I'm assigned hard news, I won't do any of the mixed media, etc. And I will loyally follow the hard news, right? And I will, while I'm there, take something for myself, but that's going to be for a personal project later. But I will give in the edit of the traditional, but I'm a documentary photographer who believes that there are multiple paths, more complex, that that will actually yield, ironically, I would say, a more journalistic truth. But I, as a documentary photographer, I feel free. I feel liberated from the conventional approach. I followed the conventional rules for years and never felt I'm nailing the complexity of this place, right? So let's see. I've got, so then how do you tell it? The screen on the left, it's a still from the video. So I have, again, I'm telling the story and I'm thinking, okay, when, again, you have to tell yourself when I have, because when you put an, or when I have my book, when my book is published, when it's published in the New York Times, when it's exhibited, right? You have to say when, because envisioning the book itself, and you start to think about all the creative little elements you can add to it, and then you play more. And so in this case, I was thinking installation. And so I have installation from the Palestinian fertility lab of, you know, happy dancing sperm, etc. That's a still on the left side, pregnant mother on the right. Amir, the little boy here, was born. His origin story is this, there's some Italians on here, I don't know how to pronounce it, quadratini. It's a really popular chocolate. And the reason this was popular was because the bag could seal. So here's another thing to consider. Doing no harm, that's sacred. That is sacred. And so I never publish anything on the sperm story that hasn't already been published. And they themselves, the women, the mothers, the wives, will not tell you how they did it until the Israelis or whoever breaks it, because they want to maximize the opportunity of other people doing it. So in this case, this was one of the first women who did it. And in the point of the interview, she kind of laughed, sighed, and then said, 1 second. And she came out before we even asked the question, said, just because I know you're going to ask, here, this is the bag that it happened in. And I keep it because you journalists always ask how, right? So juxtapose. This is even harder to visualize. I am juxtaposing, we're all children of 9 months. Where's the inequality, right? Okay, it's very obvious if you're smuggling your sperm in chocolate wrappers, there's something off. But then I want to go a little more direct. So I went to a very popular fertility clinic in Israel. And I pretended to be, I put on a really obnoxious accent, and I pretended to be a concerned woman looking to buy sperm and asking a lot of questions. And I have audio that I'm still checking to see if I can use that agency about, you know, what my rights are if I'm secretly recording. But I just asked a lot of innocent, oh my God, how do I know about the purity of the sperm? How do I know that this is pure sperm? And the answers that I got were very revealing, but also just look at this chart. This is the translated to English chart from their website. You can literally, from the ease of your iPhone, choose your sperm from the Israeli donor based on his hobbies: sports, basketball, professional tennis, loves a wide variety of music types, his height, his eye color, his hair color, etc., etc. But then how do you show that? So I started to, again, collaboration is another element. I love collaborating. First of all, these long-term stories are hard and lonely. And so when you collaborate, it gives you energy, but it also allows you to go so much further. So I started to collaborate with Bayan Dahdah. For those of you that don't know her, do yourselves a favor and follow her on Instagram. She is a bloody genius. So I said, how could we, and so she freehanded, she drew portraits of what she imagined the Israeli donors would look like. And then these are, on the bottom left, pictures given to me from the lab themselves of like objects that the sperm arrived in. And then a joke from the clinic on the right. I'm going to keep going. More portraits. And then I'm going to show you just a brief video. So there's a weekly radio show called Merasil, and it's where wives and mothers and fathers and children call on this radio show and just cry, sob, talk to their loved ones in jail, on the off chance that there's a smuggled phone or radio in the jail and that they're hearing it. They don't know. And so I took, with the permission, I actually contacted the producer, and she sent me some of her audio, and I juxtaposed it with audio that I filmed from inside the lab in the Palestinian fertility clinic. So I'm just going to show a little snippet.
وكلامكم ومحبتكم اكيد كل اللي في بالكم اليوم ان شاء الله بوصل لكل عزيز وغالي ودائما في برنامج التواصل من محبين. حبيبي قولي له يابا بدها تحكي معك. الو السلام عليكم كيف حالك؟ طمنا عنك.
So I'm going to put my audio back in. Sorry, my headphones.
So again, sometimes it is difficult to photograph here, to get access in our region for a variety of reasons that I probably won't want to say out loud for some of the places that you guys are working. I don't need to verbalize, you can guess. So it's difficult to get access sometimes. That actually, I will argue, I'm now realizing, because I used to feel such envy when I would look at photographs from South America and the rawness and the natural state and the ease. Oh, I'm not saying easy to photograph, but the ease of body, the ease of, it wasn't the same complexities of getting these bodies in the picture. It wasn't the same negotiation, right? But I'm now starting to understand that it's actually something that can be to our advantage because it forces you to go out of the box. So, and again, let the interview lead it. So I'm now showing project images from في مشمش بكرة في مشمش. Tomorrow there'll be apricots, which is another saying, proverb. So I love proverbs, I love titles, which sounds beautiful. Tomorrow there'll be apricots, but it's actually, what was the name of the collaborator you mentioned? Bayan Dahdah. Look up her BAYANDAHDAH. Where was I? But I collaborate with a lot of people, actually, with audio designers, and it's making the work so much less lonely, and it's bringing other layers to it. And increasingly, like recently, two of my colleagues from NOOR won a World Press together for collaborating, where you didn't know who took what photograph in the portrait category. Again, so you can't always get the faces, but it's so tomorrow there'll be apricots is a 5-year project where I would go. This image, no, but the majority of the images are from one apartment that was called. It's called the Martyrs' Wives. The Martyrs' Wives, and they even put on the front of the building a banner that says Martyrs' Wives. And Saudis and actually Qataris would pay rent for these women whose husbands had died. It was actually, very good intent. These are women who were into camps. They had no way of surviving, and they lost their husbands. Many of the husbands were, at the time, they were using the word freedom fighters. But it was, each apartment is identical. Each apartment has a horrendous sort of like, green fluorescent light, and nobody wanted their photographs. It was daughters and wives, people who either for conservative reasons or for fear of retribution did not want their images shown. Also, they were vulnerable because of this sign. Men would literally go and knock on the doors and say, "Oh, are you hungry? Do you have? Can we take your daughter? Can we take your daughter for a night?" Like really horrible stories. So again, I went for a news story. So when I talk about maximizing your opportunity in the field, it's not always going to be a photograph. It might be a name or inspiration for a story, someone that you meet and go back and see. I wanted to, I didn't even get to meet the wives. It was when I was meeting the men when they were alive. But the wives would just, a door would open. I would see a hand giving a tray of tea or fruits. And I was like, on a news assignment looking and thinking, I want to know what's going on there. And then I went back, and then slowly the men were going back to fight and they were dying. And the woman initially didn't want photographs, and it was fine. I just kept going. It was quite expensive to get from where I was based, from East Jerusalem, crossing that very stressful border, and then going to Amman and going to the north of Jordan. And it was a lot of money and time, but I wanted to tell their stories. They were compelling, and I knew I would find a way, and whether it was objects or something. More importantly, trust developed and a humor and a rapport between us. And in this case, this is actually one who it was the first time I met her. I got the photograph. I was interviewing her, and she said that the Syrian police had entered and beaten and shot her father in the head, like right at the first prayer in the morning. So it was like 5:30 in the morning, and they came running into the father's room, and they witnessed their father being shot in the head on the bed, she said. And her little brother, who was 12, screamed, and they turned the gun to his head, and she screamed. She was just a couple of years older than him. "Shoot me instead." And when she told the story, she just said it, and it was heavy, and we just sat there in silence, and the tears were going. And she said, "I've been cracked inside since that day." So there's these cracks on the wallpaper in the place that she's saying, and I just told her quite honestly. I said, "When you said this, I was staring at the crack, and I felt, and she said, "Yeah." And then she stood up and she reenacted So this was the collaboration of how to tell her story. But there's a million ways to do that. And this is one I had to go on the back of the house because I didn't want to photograph the front and let people know where they were based. This is the only picture, sort of a sense of place. Hala, one of the main, and not her real name, protagonists. Why did you leave me when I needed you? Okay, no, that's from a different. Okay, so Hala, right? This is her in the window here, and this is her. Hala was one of the characters I fell in love with, and Tomorrow There'll Be Apricots is a 5-year project that I put online. I hired a designer in New York, and I made an entire universe online, which I've never put. I'm going to release shortly and let it just go out into the world. Because to be honest, first I was like, oh, kumbaya, I found the answer. I don't have to wait and be rejected from 10,000 publishers, or, oh, we already did a story on this. Oh, we're not doing a story on Syrians. Oh, we've done too many stories on Syria this year. I created an entire universe where every nuance and every bit, I loved this world that was created, but then I couldn't find a home. The only home I found for it was in museums. And I never intended Tomorrow for Apricots to end up in galleries or museums. I wanted it to be in the news because it was very relevant. And what I discovered, the positive thing about it is that it really fed the creativity when you have your own virtual canvas. When you're creating basically what could be an online installation that goes anywhere, there's freedom in that. But it's expensive. You have to pay for the collaboration. And then 3, people have moved away from this. The immersive designers I talked to said it was really big for a couple of years because for the same reasons, people were excited to create these things. But then they realized, aside from the money and time, within 1 year or 2 years, these worlds would be obsolete because of how quickly the industry was moving, right? The technology was moving. So it's not worth it in that sense. It's actually better to do these creative interventions and sort of send them out on Instagram or keep them for, or yet we're going to find another way. It's constantly evolving. But one positive thing that came out of it is that I showed it to Amnesty International and they hired me to do, so nothing is a waste. The project found its way into museums around the world, and it also gave me an assignment to do a 3-country assignment on the anniversary of the Nakba, of the occupation of Palestine. So Hala has been married 2 times. This at her age of at the tender age of 17. This was the first time she'd escaped the first brutal marriage, and she's wearing her sister's negligee that had got her younger sister who had gotten married. And she, at the beginning, said she would never marry for tradition. She would marry for love. And so you can't show faces, but increasingly, as I spent time with them, the woman would. I was visiting essentially and focusing on two, 3 families, and especially Hala's family. And after a while, people would trust me. Whereas before, every time I would take a picture, the mom would come and say, show me, show me, show me. Oh, I see a little bit of my face, delete that. Towards the end, they didn't care because they knew even if I caught their face because I was photographing something else and they happened into the frame, there was trust that I would never use these photographs, right? Which of course, again, another sacred rule I never have. And so in this case, another thing that happened is the woman in these stories, the girls, they started to perform. So again, what works against you can liberate you. The curtains that were always closed, every apartment was identical, hideous polka dot curtains. We started to use the curtains almost theatrically to perform their stories. And it also, the girls they quit letting the girls go to school at the age of 12 because of fear that not in their community. They didn't feel safe. It broke the monotony when I would come. They got to play. It actually became a beautiful atmosphere. And so, and again, you don't always have to photograph a face or a body. Sometimes, again, think metaphor. Think about just leaving hints and traces and emotions, and think about not omnibodopeia. What do they call? What's the literary thing called when you ascribe human conditions to inanimate objects? Forgetting the name, but think about that. Think about the emotions that you can give from an object if you tenderly photograph it. And so in this case, this was a negligee with a backstory at the beginning of the war, but we don't have much time, so I'm going to continue on. Also, so the photograph on the left, it was Hala's second wedding. I was invited to it, but I didn't make it in time. It was hard to get there. And when I went a few weeks later with a wedding gift, she was already home. And she actually, the second husband was kind to her, not like the first who had beaten her. And again, marriage in this case is an option. There's not enough food, right? So she's trying to help her family. Like all they ate was a bag of mulakhiya, right? Like these dried, I don't know, for those that don't know what it's like, almost like a kind of like a dried spinach, but it tastes different. That's what they were eating. No meat, no. And so she married, but that man was nice. And because he was nice, his mother beat her because she thought that he was being too weak. And she was beaten so badly that she went back home. So the picture on the left, she got to keep the shoes. The wedding dress was rented. And then the one on the right is from the wedding day. It's from her own picture, but I, of course, disguised her face. And these are pictures she would send me on WhatsApp, kissing her hand, etc. She's a poet. And that's the thing about Hala is, and I don't read Arabic. I left Jordan when I was 4 years old. And before September 11th, there wasn't a lot of options of places to take Arabic in the US. I petitioned 2 times at my university, never had enough people. So when she gave me one of her poems in Arabic, I had to ask people who do it, is it good? She never got to finish Tawjihi, her high school, and it always bothered her. And most of the people I gave the poem to, they said, no, it's not sophisticated. But when I got it translated, I really thought it was quite wonderful, especially the last line, haven't you figured out by now that your line is, God, I can't read it, it's blocked. Can you read it, the last line, Alice?
There we are. Haven't you figured it out by now that your lion is nothing but a panicked cat?
Of course, for those that Assad, lion in Arabic, the ruling family. So here's a little, so again, you can't always tell a story, but you just get little traces, any traces that you can, and you find a way later to put it together. I'm not going to show this whole thing because I don't even know how much time we have. I got too excited, but I highly advise, I'm just going to show like 2-3 seconds of it. WhatsApp audio. Again, you really have to question, what are you saying? I was on assignment for a UN agency, and it was when bodies were perishing at sea. It was when the little boy washed in the sleeping position of a toddler, washed up on the shores of Turkey, dead. So there was these images, and I was been assigned to photograph camps and urban refugees in Jordan, and listening to the interviews that were horrendous, and the pictures were just like any other picture that I've seen and refugee camps. I didn't feel that I had done justice to the interviews, and I felt like a failure. And it was purely, and I was really feeling quite depressed about it, to be honest. And it was the last week that I was on the assignment, and by chance I was with a woman, exhausted. Her husband was in Germany. She'd lost, she didn't have enough food for her kids. And I recognized as a mother that exhaustion on her face when the baby was crying. And she didn't have the energy to pick it up, the child. And as the baby started to just angry, fist furling, she sort of absentmindedly picked up a WhatsApp message from the husband, an audio message, and push play. It was a lullaby the father sent from Germany. And as the baby heard the lullaby, its furled fist sort of, and the child fell asleep. And so with that, in the last week, I asked everyone about that I interviewed if they were comfortable sharing it. So this is just a little snippet, but you can see it online. Just put Syria to show like a couple seconds.
شلونك؟ يابا شلونك؟ انت مليح؟ خير يا رنوت، كيفك؟ ان شاء الله بخير.
There, because I think we just don't have time. In the universe that I created, that was a failure, but not, God, I really thought I had arrived. I had figured out the answer. But again, anyway, at the very end, I have, because what you have to question, what do you want it to be, right? What do you want your project to be? And there was a part of me that had documented firsthand rapes and evidence that I didn't know that maybe hadn't been selected by the newspaper I was hired for, or the NGO didn't do anything with it. And so I had at the very end, and I am going to try to release this online, just put it on my website. I tried so hard for 5 years to push this project anywhere else. And I have an appendage that I imagine one day could be something, if there ever was like an ICC, check of some of the abuses that had happened. But it was almost all women, like 95% were women in the project. And so then you go to this appendage section and you have this quote, which, could you read it for me, Alice? Sorry.
Of course. So they forced us to undress. A guard pushed a stick into my rectum, raping my honor, and then he put the stick in my mouth and told me to lick it. I blew my mouth and the guard laughed, saying he had deflowered me, said the father.
So I wanted so there had been rape and other things revealed. And so I initially wanted, you would assume it's a woman, and then in the smaller text, the father. And so there I had the section of the men, and so and the abuses that happened. So in this case, he doesn't have his teeth. All of his teeth were bashed out by a Kalashnikov. It's black nubs where the teeth used to be. In his hand, he used to be an architect, and they also beat his hand to the point where he can't use it anymore. And so I have this section with all of their just literally the testimonies. So finally, I'm just going to show a couple of pictures. I was given, and this is a testament to, for those of you that feel depressed because you're given, oh, this is an NGO assignment that's not interesting, commercial assignments that's this, da, 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 da. Again, every opportunity to be in the field, you can create something powerful and for yourself, and it's a wasted opportunity if not. This was a group project for my agency NOOR, and it was EU money. And I saw previous years where they'd funded an Islamophobia project, and they did like basically commercial photography, not a lot of depth. And it was a nice amount of money for this assignment. And I could have taken, if I were sane, I would have done something much more simple. But I can't. If I'm tackling a subject and I'm telling people stories, the weight is heavy. And I also want to always challenge myself. I'm really hard on myself. And I never feel at ease, like, oh, I can relax. This is a good project. I'm already thinking about, did I do the best? Can I do this better? What can I do with this? What's the next project, etc. So in this case, Diary of Inquietude, testimony of, I can't read the title right now, but I went to France. It was the first time I'd worked as a photographer in Europe. And it was really hard to get access. There was a lot of fear. And also just culturally, it was very different. You know, you get invited to photograph in the Middle East, you get tea, you get fed, they'll give you hours of their time. Whereas here, Western time, really fast, but also a lot of the people in the suburbs, not as many services from the state. So if they missed one bus, they could lose their job because the bus comes every hour as opposed to, every 10 times an hour in the center of Paris. So it was really, so I had to find a way, again, traces. So that's all you can do is you're like, every moment, it's a wasted moment if you don't grab a bit of testimony, a bit of evidence, a bit of emotion, a trace, right? And so with that, so this is the text, but I ended up having these moments where, when you let the conversation lead first, it can really go somewhere. I actually was really struggled to get people to agree to be photographed, to meet. It was and again, I have 2 small children. I had to be in France, hire a fixer, hire a translator. I don't speak French. It was really hard. But again, I know what it's like seeing people misrepresented here for people that don't speak Arabic, or even if they do, still misrepresent. So I'm very cautious of that. So again, I will pay, I will get transcripts. I will pay and get the transcripts, the audio transcribed. I will pore over the notes and then think about how I can build it later. And so in this case, I finally got permission to photograph the so-called Burkini activists in Grenoble. And I had to change my flight, and I immediately took a train down. And this woman, Nasreen, young lady, I should say, she hosted all of the women who wanted to come. And so it was 17 women, each telling their story and not knowing if they were going to let me photograph them or not. And it was exhausting because I only had that night, and I sat and I listened to story by story by story by story, interviewing. And then in the story, some of them would say, you can photograph me. And then I would, at the end of it, photograph them quickly. I had just a few seconds. And Nisreen wasn't sure, and her mother definitely wasn't even in the room, but she started to listen, stand in the doorway and listen to the stories. And the mom came and she said, can I tell my story? I don't want to be photographed, but can I tell my story? And he said, of course. And the mom sat down and she started to tell a story about how when she arrived from Morocco, Algeria, sorry, I can't remember at this moment. It was either Morocco or Algeria. She had just given birth and she was breastfeeding. And so she went, and of course, you know, speaking French, of course, that's like the second or the official language. And so she went to a doctor, and the nurse in front of her, speaking to the doctor, was like, ugh, they breed like rabbits. Ugh, I'm going to give her something to take care of that. And so the nurse is talking about her as if she was an animal, and she was telling the story, and they gave her a medication. And so she went home, and within days she had her milk dried up, and there was no milk to feed her baby. So she's new immigrant, feeling insecure, lost, and now she's not feeding her baby. She became hysterical and she didn't know what to do. And so she's telling the story and tears are going down her face. And she says, I went to another doctor, and the doctor asked, what medication are you taking? And the doctor said, and I showed him, and he said, how, this is impossible. This is the most extreme level of birth control. Of course, this would dry you up. What doctor would give you this? And then she understood what had happened. And as she talked about the humiliation, these tears going down her face, Nisreen, the one in the picture, was just staring at her mother. It was the first time she'd heard the story. And so sometimes it's not even if I hadn't, well, actually, no, I didn't get a photograph of the mother. It didn't matter, because I had the depth of understanding of what Islamophobia was in France. And so in the end, Nisreen, we were talking about Orientalism and bodies, how they're represented, you know, in the Maghreb in the north. And then she's like, because there was fruit on the table, she picked up, she was like, aren't I exotic? And I got this, I love this photograph. And then I'm going to show, so again, very limited time, and I have big dreams every time I go to the field. I want to tell this, I want to tell this. Politically, again, I have a checklist of things. Politically, I want to do this. Emotionally, I want to do this. And that's what I meant to say at the beginning of your project. Title, name, write down every adjective that if you successfully tell the story you want to tell, these are the emotions that will be created. These are the locations that you need to tell. These are the politics you want to tell. When you have these adjectives and you have these locations and nouns, those become the sort of map to begin your story. And so in this case, I was always obsessed with the Algerian Massacre that had happened in 1961 at this point on the Seine, which is not really discussed in France. It was in 1961, scores of murdered, like literally bloated bodies going down the river in the middle of this quaint Seine river in the middle of town. Like, it's insane. And so I went to the location, which now had in the last, I can't remember how many years, they finally built a small plaque. And so I layered the footage that I filmed of the Seine with two of the Burkini activists who are making fun of, "Ooh, aren't we dangerous? Are we dangerous in our swim gear?" And so this is just a little, And the most important thing, I was giving an exhibit for this, and it was a small space. And because of COVID, there couldn't be headphones, and I couldn't have my audio impede into the other exhibits. So I'm a stubborn person. I'm like, okay, the testimonies, because I had created an entire audio file of all of the women I interviewed, because I didn't have much space for the visuals. And they were like, well, we can't have headphones. So I'm stubborn. You tell me no, I will find a way. So I put my favorite interviews, ethnographic interviews, and I layer it against this small video I'm going to show you. And this is the last thing.
Et maintenant, moi, en tant que femme musulmane voilée, en fait, je suis pas prête à faire des concessions. Alors, si j'étais pas terroriste la voilée, bien sûr, je serais, peut-être, hein, c'est pas sûr, mais peut-être, oui, je vais faire des concessions. Je mettrais un maillot de bain traditionnel pour aller amener mes enfants à la piscine, pour accompagner la classe de mon enfant à la piscine.
That's an installation. Sorry.
Je vais passer la personne.
It's actually like a 12-minute footage installation that was in the exhibit. So with that, I'm going to conclude and open it up to questions. Any question works. I just hope that I've given you some fodder and inspiration. If you are sort of struggling, like, why are my projects not going further? or you're stuck in your own, or you're not getting proposals. It's a hard path, but I just want to encourage you guys to push yourselves and understand how much more photography can be. So with that, let's open it up to questions.
Okay, Altamash's question was also my question. So Altamash said, how do you find the strength to end a project? How do you know that it's run its course and you need to move on to something else? Like, I was exactly the same. And in that as well, have you ever felt kind of too uneasy to the point where you think, I can't continue with this? And do you have any that you've actually abandoned as well?
That's a great question, Altamash. Yeah, there's a lot of there's a graveyard of abandoned projects on my hard drives, ones that I had to acknowledge I couldn't do. I think that there's a point you also have to question, like, for example, the apricots project, that's insane. But at that point, to be honest, it was more, again, I'm stubborn and guilt because I'd taken their time. Quite often young photographers will feel guilty, and like, because I'll be looking at their work and I'm like, oh, this could have been a great portrait, but it's kind of rushed and crap. Can you go back? And oh, I felt bad taking their time, but you already took their time. And if you take their time and on top of it, you didn't do a testament of something great to that time, you really wasted their time. So taking a little bit more time to do something better is ideal. So again, how do you know when it's done? There's times that you just have to admit it's hard. There's times that in the case I was emotionally invested and I found a way. But there's a great story of one of my colleagues, Eric Godesman, and I love his work and I love his book, Sudden Flowers. I highly recommend it. And he tells a story. He's one of the mentors for the Arab documentary photo program, and he did a long-term, it was like 15-year project, 12-year project on AIDS in Ethiopia. And at the time, it was really taboo to talk about AIDS. If you had AIDS, you didn't want anyone in the community to know. And so there were these children that were sort of orphaned. Parents had died from it, etc., and they had gotten it the transmission at birth. So he was photographing this group of children, and then he was photographing people in the community, and the children, he could photograph their faces, but the people who had AIDS, no. And he had different sub-chapters, and one of the chapters was called, Who Would I Be If I Were Not Who I Am? And he asked the children who had AIDS this, and there's one that it's like a punch in the heart. Oh my God, that's why text brings another layer. I swear to God, every time I see it, it's a punch in the heart. The little boy, so they would wear costumes to illustrate who they would be if they were not who they are now. And he put like a white beard, and he has like a little old man cane, and he said an old man, because he didn't think he would grow up to be one. So that's one. But to end the project, because 12 years, man. I've never photographed one project for 12 years. By the time I'm done with this one, I probably will. But he said he knew the project was over because he was photographing the adults, and everything was always how to disguise their faces, and it was usually their backs. And he said he knew the project had reached a sort of symbolic end when somebody turned around to face the camera and said, you can take my face. And he understood that there had been a full circle. So quite often these things it's a gut instinct. And again, good photography, you have to really start to trust these whisperings. If you actually see an image in your head, trust that, recreate it, find a way to tell it. And it's really just about gut instinct, if that makes any sense, I hope.
Yeah, for sure. I think
any other questions?
Yeah. Yes, we have Ria. Can you see Ria's question?
Oh, wait, let me see. I wanted to say that. Thank you, Habibti, really. Oh, Ria. Hi, Tanya. I'm Ria, Bahraini. Yeah, since I'm not sharing my screen, I can finally see. I'm currently in Manila. I've got 2 questions. Could you provide any tips on how to become comfortable telling a story, doing a story, for example, that I'm interested in, or own the story if I'm an outsider of a certain culture or society? How often do photo agencies accept unsolicited works for viewing if there are no open calls available? Thank you. Yeah, you just ask the easy questions, Ria. Okay. How to become comfortable? Okay. Insider, outsider. There's a lot of literature right now on the concept of insider, outsider storytelling. And that quote I had at the beginning, which I don't know if anyone screenshotted, it's all about that concept. So some people are getting really butthurt because they're saying, oh, I'm white and that means I can't photograph in parts of Africa. That's not what's being said. People are upset because they've been represented. People are upset because they're hiring outsiders to tell their own story. But it doesn't mean that you can't find a way in. And actually, again, privilege. How? Privilege. So for example, okay, I have a Jordanian passport, but does that mean I'm entitled to do whatever the hell I want narratively here? No. And it weighs heavily on me. I actually think that I've worked more slowly being based in Palestine precisely because I'm not Palestinian. I have a Palestinian husband and Palestinian children, but especially with my work, because I'm actually going beyond the boundaries and playing. So because I can't do a first person voice, which I'm moving towards in later work that's going to come, where I really put a little bit more of myself in a first person voice in, I'm not Palestinian. I don't have the right to, or that's something I've told myself anyway. And I agonize over that. But because of that, because I'm checking my privilege, it forces me to find other directions in, be it collaboration or just more slowly thinking about how I'm photographing and really utilizing a sort of ethnographic approach of, and then I also, before I send work out into the community, or rather, sorry, to the world, if I'm documenting a community I'm not from, I'll get some critiques from anthropologists, filmmakers, the people that I photograph themselves. And maybe, there's things that people don't want to see about themselves, right? So it's not like I'm like, I'm gonna follow every critique that you say, but I'm gonna listen to it and think about it. And so I've said quite often, if I send a story out and people in the community don't recognize themselves in it, then I have failed. So how can you do it? The first thing you can do is always analyze. You could be from I don't know, you're in Manila, you said you could, Bahraini-based photographer, currently in Manila. Okay, interesting. You could be not Hawaiian. You could be, you could be Hawaiian based in Hawaii, but you might be from a family of, elite family who had the best education, who's got the best camera equipment, etc. You still need to check your privilege, especially if you're going into a community that, oh, that's my child. Hi, sweetie. I'm no talking. Okay, I'm almost done. Sorry, that was distracting. You could be from the country that you're documenting in, and you still need to check your privilege. Omar Imam's work, he did a brilliant project. He was an ADPP student. He did 12 photographs in the 6 months. 12 photographs. I don't think anyone photographed less from our ADPP project. And that project is in museums around the world. He got the Tim Hetherington Award for his first project. He became a Rijks fellow, competing with Dutch people for this position. And he checked his privilege. He called himself a privileged urban Syrian refugee in Beirut because he was photographing a poor community in the Bekaa Valley. So I think that's one way that you can do it. Tips on being comfortable doing a story is okay. So don't just parachute in, right? Like have a guide, talk to people, just don't bring your camera right out. That's one. And the other question, how often do photo agencies, man, they're really, I can tell you from personal, they're going through a lot of, especially, I think they were already questioning the traditional mode of economy around photography. Editorial is dead. They were already struggling before COVID, and now during this pandemic, really there's a lot of restructuring. So I don't think photo agencies they're struggling to survive right now. That's not, so again, get the traditional mode of, I know it feels good, I got my name in the New York Times, I'm being acknowledged by Magnum, A, B, C, D. It's not about that. It's actually questioning now, creating your own collectives and utilizing the platforms to get your work out there. You can use Instagram to your advantage to tease a story. Don't put everything out there, right? But tease a story. And there's a lot of, and if there's not a publishing platform that exists, create it. Like in the Middle East right now, there are so many talented photographers, but there's a lot of exploitative media that will not pay. Well, how are we ever gonna elevate if we don't create an industry around it? So we need to find a way of challenging and creating our own publishing houses. Sahan, hi Tanya, is that important to follow a certain style for a story, which is photographer's own style, or the photographer should explore styles that the story might demand? I think realistically speaking, you have a style, right? That's yours, that you start to develop. For example, mine is Black humor. but I couldn't use Black humor. I don't really have, there's like the website that Alice put at the beginning where the woman was jumping up and down on the couch is Black humor, but I didn't really bring my signature Black humor to the Apricots project because I was documenting people who had been gang raped, who were hungry, so the Black humor worked in the West Bank in most situations, but it didn't work on the Apricots story. So I think you have your signature style. My signature style across the board is going to be collaborative when possible. It's going to be ethnographic. It's going to be led by their text initially, but absolutely there should be a natural reflection and it should evolve when you're in the field. And that's what's exciting. It's constantly evolving. You're that crow flying. Is it snowing? Is it raining? Is it? So absolutely you need to evolve. Pragya. Do you want to ask the question and then I'll answer, Alice?
So I really like this. So how can you conserve authenticity of your perspective and vision when you have to consider all these different audiences that you have to contend with? And then do you feel yourself creating different versions of the same stories?
Authenticity of your perspective and vision. Here's the end of the day. It's at the end of the day, it's not about you. It is about you. So I'm going to sound like I'm going to contradict myself. I don't find work interesting until I figure out when I'm critiquing, when I'm mentoring, until I know why the hell are you telling the story? Why the hell should I care? Don't come to me with, a guy came to me with images from Mumbai. Where was it? I can't remember what region on the Ganges, but it was poverty. It was widows on the Ganges. And it was just classic black and white photography of poor women by the Ganges. And it looked like derivative images that I've seen before. And I was like, why are you telling the story? Oh, it's beautiful, classic, these women's story. Shut up, I'm giving you, those that know me know that I'm holding back curse words. There's nothing that pisses me off more. Why are you telling the story? So the authenticity, why you want to tell the story, what your interest is, you color it. But at the end of the day, it's not about you, right? And nobody is entitled. You shouldn't be. I have problems with work like, say, Vivienne Sassine, some of Vivienne Sassine's work in Africa, where she feels that she's using bodies, she's using black bodies sort of as props, right? Like, it's not about you. It's about, you really need to consider their perspective. You'll find a way. It's a delicate dance. And when you feel comfortable in your skin that you have ethically represented them, but you know, at the end of the day, no one is ever going to be 100% happy. You're always going to have somebody get pissed off and not like the work, or we have call out culture now. You're never going to make people 100% happy. But if you did the best that you can in terms of ethical representation, and people had and most importantly, people had a say in how they were being represented, right? Then you're doing okay. So at the end of the day, if you don't feel that, if they, for example, only want you to use an image, the ones that you really want to use that people aren't comfortable with, and that image is crap, don't send it out, right? It's the brutal truth. I can't tell you how many times that I didn't use work that I spent a lot of time working on. But at the end of the day, you're telling somebody else's story. It's a privilege that your privilege that they're allowing you in. It's an incredible gift. So that's what it is. It's a delicate dance. What if my project comes? Sorry, go ahead, Alice.
Yeah, I got a DM earlier. You're talking about in line again with privilege. You know, you've made this amazing work in like a really politically charged place in Palestine, and there's, for want of a better word, lots of interesting events happening. So how do we relate back to that when we're, you know, sitting comfortable? Everyone here has an internet connection and they have Zoom, you know, we're sitting comfortably in Dubai or wherever we are in the world, you know, how do we then, you know, get the energy to find a story to work on?
Oh man, that's a question we get on a normal day. During the pandemic, it's hard. And that's the other thing is like, sometimes maybe it's not about taking the picture. Like I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, people taking photographs of their children, people taking photographs of self-portraits in isolation, balconies. After a while, oh my God, how many diary of pandemic. Like I got bored. I got inundated with these images. So sometimes taking a picture to take a picture just It's not that interesting. So you have to question, there's times, because especially since there's so much work, again, it's a deeply intellectual, I really resent, you know, in our region, especially while there's some unbelievable photography rising up, we still haven't, the industry isn't there. And I think an understanding of what photography is, I think people still see it as event or wedding photography. It's a deeply intellectual exercise. And so there's times that maybe it's not about literally photographing, but researching. It's about, man, if you want to be telling a story, you need to be obsessed, because you're going to have to spend a lot of time and get a lot of rejections from the community and letting you get access. So sometimes if it's not the time to be photographing, it's the time to be researching, reading, and not just reading the news, reading, reading, wait, oh, sorry, 1 second. Sweetie, that's a magic bath, okay? It's your birthday bubble bath, okay? Okay. You want to spend the time to be reading unexpected books, fiction, poetry, proverbs, rock and roll records, looking for clues. So use this time for research, so you don't feel depressed that you're wasting time online, looking at Instagram, doing nothing. It doesn't have to be nothing. Sometimes you just have to feed a different part of yourself. It's not always, but even let's just pretend we're not in a pandemic, right? Just pretend. It's not always about taking the photograph itself. Some of the heaviest hitting, most important parts are the conversations, which we actually now have proven, as sick of Zoom as so many of us are, there's a lot you can be doing on Zoom, on WhatsApp, on interaction. So use this time for research, conversations, reading, etc., if that helps. That was long-winded, sorry.
Yeah, amazing. And that also for Minna, Salim, and for Sohana, I think that answers both of your questions as well, kind of getting stuck in a rut with regards to projects, particularly at the moment, kind of taking yourself away from the situation, I guess. And then, so we're a little over time, but maybe we can do maybe 2 more.
I'll give as much time, because I think I was over time. So then of course you have a life, Alice. So
I don't, there's a pandemic on. So, this is amazing.
How do I pronounce, is it Mena? What if your project relies on facial expressions and the women here in Upper Egypt refuse this, as this will affect their honor? What should I do then? Okay, that's a tough one. So literally, if your project relies on facial expressions, it's going to be a matter of you're interviewing. So just and that's interesting, and I'd have to know more about that to sort of advise you how to circumvent it. So I don't exactly understand. That's interesting. I can't give you specific advice, because that's kind of random and intriguing. But let's say that that's true. It has to be their facial expressions. I think there would be another way, whether it's audio, etc., etc. Maybe it doesn't have to be their facial expressions, but let's say for the sake of the argument that it needs to be their facial expressions, you will find someone, right? You'll find maybe a widow who, I don't give a damn, right? It's just about spending enough time in the field. And quite often people that, like I told you, the 5-year project with the Syrian urban refugees in that apartment complex, they all said no at the beginning. And so slowly, I photographed objects, and then it moved to their children, and then it moved and on. So maybe you're going to find kind of a renegade who doesn't care. Maybe you need to think about sort of immersive technology, and you can show her. Maybe you want to use filters like Instagram filters, and you could show them like emulating a facial expression you're interested in capturing, and you use yourself and you say it would be like that. There's ways. You have to really push yourself. And then at the end of the day, like for example, there's a project I'm dying to do. Well, no, I don't want to give it away. There's a project that's really hard to do here. It's emotively and political. I've been dreaming of it for 10 years, and everyone tells me, you can't do it. So I haven't pushed for it because I haven't found my opening in, but I always have my eyes and I'm waiting to do it. So if that's the case, it might not yet be the time. Try to think if there's a way. Wendy Ewald, which if you could type that, where could I type that? Wendy Ewald, Wendy, Ewald, EWALD. She's kind of the queen mother of collaborative community photography. She actually mentored Eric Goethe, the one I mentioned earlier. She was one of the first people. Okay, so you know, we have oh God, I'm forgetting her name now. We have someone that preceded Jim Goldberg. Jim Goldberg, you need to check his Instagram out. You need to check him out. He's a god. But Wendy Ewald went to Saudi Arabia in the 80s and photographed women in Saudi Arabia. No foreigner was getting access at that time. And what she did was she took like medium format pictures and brought them the negatives and had the woman scratch out what they didn't want to show in the picture. And what was fascinating quite often, it wasn't the things that you assumed that they would want to not be showing. So sometimes it would be like not about honor, but maybe she hated her nose. Like it would, and that was almost equally fascinating to see what would be. So there's ways you just let them have a say. Maybe come to the house with facial expression. So if it's still or video, I'm not sure. If it's video, that'll be harder, but come to the house and print the picture and say, could you cover what you don't want? There's an amazing photographer, oh my God, I love her. I don't know how to say her last name. She's in Ruwa. If you go to our Ruwa account, she's a former student of mine and now a colleague. She's photographing the Bedouin in Sinai. And no matter where the Bedouin communities are, quite often it's hard to access the women in the community. You're in, oh my God, sweetie, go to the bathtub. Okay, no, sweetie. Anyway, she had the women in the community who do like sort of it's not tatrees like Palestinian tatrees. I don't know what it's called. It's a different kind of sewing. But she gave the women the photographs of themselves, and then they themselves made this amazing embroidery over. So find a way of letting the woman, and so maybe it's the eyes that are showing, and they might be comfortable with that. That was a very long-winded answer to that, but I hope that helped. Any other questions?
I think that's great. I think that really gives your subject a lot of agency there as well.
Agency.
There you go.
That's a good word. That's a really
Come
good
with
word.
the buzzwords today.
Any other questions?
Okay, one more. Yeah, I mean, your tips on you know, again, go back to privilege, accessing your subjects, I think is a good one to end on. You're an outgoing person. Can you help us introverts?
Wait, where is that question?
This was the end of Pragya's question. Could you elaborate on how you're able to situate yourself in projects with your privilege and find a balance between storytelling with appropriate stories, getting access to your subjects as well, and then doing them legitimate justice?
Yeah, that whole, there's something people are complaining about, like people who want to publish free work. They're like, oh, we don't have a budget to pay you, but we're going to give you great exposure. And you're like, screw you, I can't live on exposure. There's an equivalent of that, of people who go to the field and ask people to let them photograph them when they're uncomfortable. And they say, oh, yes, but I'm gonna shine light on your issue. And oh my God, there's nothing that angers me more than people that still try to sell that tripe. Maybe that's what we hope at best. At best, oh my God, I'm a bit, at this point, I'm a bit cynical, especially working on Israel-Palestine issues. Like, despite all of the amazing photography by people that aren't me, that people have been on the front lines and work that would make anyone sob on a normal day, that hasn't seemed to budge the needle of understanding, right? So if that work hasn't done it, then obviously, that's why actually, again, I see a failure of photography in Palestine, which is actually between the failure of photography or the reaction, be it the editorial space that it needs or the reaction of people to see it and willing to see it. Between that failure and between getting the same assignments again and again and again, I've been here now, married and living full-time for 11 years, you get tired of the same assignments. And so I have a responsibility. Again, I have at the beginning of my projects, I have like, if I succeed with this project, these are the emotions that it will prompt. These are the locations that have to be in it. And when you think about the emotions that you're feeling about this story, then you kind of can visualize what are things that will show those emotions. And so it's a good beginning. Of course, I want there to be legitimate justice, and my God, but I am also not under any delusion. I'm not a white savior. I think that we need to consider that. The best that I can hope is that I used photography in a way that could, the best is make someone pause, because this is a place where everyone assumes they know something and they have an opinion, is that somebody will go, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, and sit and at least just pause and think. That's, maybe I'm putting my bar really low, but that's all I can hope for now. So in terms of your privilege and balance between storytelling and appropriating stories. Yeah, good questions. I mean, you're appropriating, you're taking. And some photographers, they don't feel that. Even within, I have debates with colleagues, they're like, I don't feel I'm taking. I feel I'm being respectful and I'm doing a good job. I envy them because I have sleepless nights. I agonize because I think every single time, even if we're poor and we haven't sold the story, we are still taking. So I think that's the best that you can do. If you can at least, again, recognize your privilege and think about ways of circumventing it, or at least acknowledging it, or using your privilege to, like in the project I showed at the beginning. And that's why if you can do some more immersive or creative work, and the same work, you might be able to do something more creative I discovered the fine art world rather later, because I did journalism. I was trained in journalism and in anthropology. I never even took an art history class. I mean, I always went to museums and read, but I never even took an art history class. And now that's what I'm hungry for. I'm dreaming of doing an MFA. I'm like, I have a master's, but I want to do an MFA. I want to feed that part of my brain because I feel liberated. I feel like it was only once I had the physical space of an art, the Apricots project, and I was able to use giant wallpaper and use a little slather of photograph from the curtains of these hideous curtains and the apricots. Every house had the same curtains, and I wanted to psychologically create the space to feel these closed windows and small rooms. So I slathered with the amazing curator Peggy Sue Amison from East Wing, slathering. I actually had a show in Dubai, slathering the wallpaper, and I wanted you to feel small in it, and then putting little clues, small screens where you could interact and see the poetry and move things around. And I think that you have a lot of freedom when you start to realize that your projects can live in different forms. And again, challenging yourself. This is the book form. And again, the book itself, it should never be an extended photo essay. That's boring, or the best hits of. We don't need another photo book that's the best hits of a sequenced photo essay extended. The book itself, there's a book that's called, I'm going to say a curse word, I'm sorry. It's called Carpe fucking Diem. And it's one of, all of my students know it. I talk about it obsessively, and it's by the guy who's finally doing my book. It's a book about a woman, a diary of a woman trying to get pregnant and failing. She's doing the IVF and she's failing. And so she photographs the whole thing. There's no text, which for me is weird because I love text and clues and investigations, but it's all a private diary metaphor. But every single time I refer to that book, I see something different. I see another metaphor. I read it differently. So the twofold. One, to challenge yourself, say, when I have my exhibit, when I have my book, when this is published, and you have the different edits for that. And that's how you can situate yourself. Is I had more freedom with the Breda exhibit, the installations that I did. I never had politically more of the clues. I never had the captions. I never had the clues, because with my work, it can't just be about the two-dimensional pictures. When you have the audio and you're hearing someone say, gruffly ordering someone at a checkpoint, when you bring all of these elements together, then you're attempting to situate yourself. Mama. Sweetie, I'm online.
I think that's a really good place to wrap up there. Yeah, fantastic.
Somebody could yes, I'll type the answer. 1 second. Okay, wait, how do I, I tried to write it, type answer. Oh, it didn't let me. Oh, wait, there it is. Okay, sorry. Thank you. All right. Thank you, guys. So the next workshop. So guys, what I can tell you about the ones that are coming up, Roy, he was a student, but beyond that, he's an amazing designer. I've hired him to do designs, a great photographer, but his design bookmaking is next level. I'm going to be attending this. Do not miss Roy's workshop. Augustine also is a student of mine, but it's like one of those situations where the student becomes a master during the workshop. The man is a genius. He is a walking poetic metaphor. Go and see that talk. And I don't know, Mesa, is it Mesa?
Mace, yes.
I don't know yet her, but I've heard people singing praises. Bigger than that, because we don't have an industry in our region, shit is happening. Things are elevating. And we're a tribe. We are a transnational tribe of weirdos. We don't all fit in. You don't have to be Bahraini to tell stories in Bahrain. You just have to be respectful and connected. Things are happening. And what Go Photo Plus is doing, bringing these workshops for free, we are elevating our game. We are appropriating our stories. We are reappropriating. It's time to be creative and wacky. And photography can be healing, not only for the people that you're telling their stories, but also for yourself. Don't be hard on yourself. If you're stuck at home right now, use this time to think a little out of the box. You might be get these WhatsApp messages going with the people you want to connect with, and they might come into your book later. So let me see, there's another. How do you determine where your story will find its home? Oh my God. You have to be willing to accept that your project might be homeless for years, but you keep going and you be humble. You show it to some of my greatest opportunities. The first grant that I ever got from Magnum Foundation happened at the Perpignan Festival at a booth that half of the people I was with was like, oh, they're not important. I'm going to go stand in the New York Times booth and wait an hour and a half to get 2 minutes because and by the time I get there, they're so exhausted. They've seen 10 billion projects. I actually talked to someone at the little side booth and I ended up having an amazing conversation and ended up getting nominated, secret ballot nominated for the grant that I got for Occupied Pleasures. You just have to be willing, because that's why I say you have to be obsessed. Don't let it be about, and that's the other thing is quite often when you're starting off and you finally start to get your project where you want it to go, you want to send it out immediately and then no one's picking it up and you're like, oh, I'm going to put it on Instagram. No, keep your babies close. Leave teasers, but don't put everything out. There's that horrible saying, I don't know if they say it in the UK, but they say it in America, why buy the milk if you've got the cow for free? Like, is that what they say? Anyway, you don't give your whole project out online. You put little teasers to drive people to you, but you just have to keep working because you're obsessed and you know that it's a good story and you will find a home, or you will, bloody, and this is where we're going, create a collective, create a new platform and create the home. As Augustine will tell you, go to the talk with Roy. You're going to pick up about and Augustine, you're going to get about self-publishing. You will make a home if you don't find a home.
Yes, that was start to end mind-blowing. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. It's been an amazing. Alice, you're lovely. Alice doesn't she not have the best voice on earth? I want to record it and wake up to it every morning.
Auntie
love you all.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you. Just before I tune out as well, thank you so much to Goethe again for sponsoring this, for supporting us, and thank you all so much for attending.